One, two, three.
The following is an audio exclusive featuring the full uncut interview with Colette Pichon Battle, founder and executive director of the Gulf Coast Center for Law and Policy. She was recently featured in our episode, Ecology, the Infrastructure of the Future.
When Hurricane Ida hit the Gulf Coast this August, exactly 16 years after Hurricane Katrina, all eyes were on New Orleans' levee system. The levees that failed so disastrously back then have been invested in and rebuilt in the many years since. They didn't fail this time, and you could almost hear the sigh of relief. But MacArthur Genius Award-winning landscape designer Kate Orff believes that gray infrastructure like levees and floodgates and seawalls can only take us so far. The infrastructure we really need, she says, isn't gray, but green. With climate change now a fact of life, we can't indefinitely hold back rising tides, but we do have the capacity to go forward, not fighting nature, but designing creatively, softly with it. For a reminder of just how real the challenges are, we go to Colette Pichon Battle in Louisiana. She's the founder and executive director of the Gulf Coast Center for Law and Policy. Colette, welcome back to the show. Our hearts are with you. Where are you right now? What's top of your mind as we have this conversation?
Thanks so much, Laura. It's really great to hear from you. You always check in on our communities, and we really appreciate it. I'm calling in today from North Texas in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We're still evacuated from my home in St. Tammany Parish, which is in that southeast corner just before the Mississippi border. Top of mind right now is really just getting back to our home. We're hoping to leave early tomorrow morning. We've got information that our power is back on. We did stay through the storm, and we watched the water rise. We watched the wind. It was a very intense and scary at times moment, but we were lucky that the flooding that could have been did not happen to us on the North Shore, as we call it. The problem was we were out of power, and on day 4 at about 113 on the heat index, we just couldn't stay anymore. Both my partner and I have special needs. We had a child with us or a young adult with us. And we just got to the point where waiting it out wasn't what we could do anymore. So I came here to Texas, where quite ironically, my mom evacuated from Katrina 16 years ago and now lives. And here's where we are today. That's where I'm calling in from.
So since Katrina, there's been all this talk about investing in the levee system and the tidal control systems that now kind of ring parts of the Gulf Coast. There's been a lot of investment in that concrete infrastructure. We always have our eyes on the people. How has the investment been on the community side when it comes to infrastructure?
Well, I think it's important to acknowledge that the seawalls that have been built did mitigate flooding. But it's also important to acknowledge that the mitigation of flooding places like Houma, Lower Terrebonne, and Lower Lafourche parishes, and places like Plaquemines Parish that are outside the levee system meant that some people got as much as 8 feet of water into their homes. This, while it might sound like the levees held or the seawalls worked, is little consequence for the folks who lost their homes already. We were just talking with the principal chief of the Houma Nation today, who said down in those lower parishes, it was 8 feet even with everything working. I think it's important to make a distinction between the seawalls that protect the coast and the levees that surround New Orleans. Quite incorrectly, Hurricane Katrina is always sort of linked back to New Orleans as though the eye of the storm went over that city, but it didn't. It went just east of the city, over my parish and over the on Mississippi around Bay St. Louis, and that's where the strongest winds were when the levees failed in New Orleans. It was not because it got a direct hit from a hurricane. In fact, when the hurricane winds that hit New Orleans were around a category 2 or 3, and the levees failed. It's important to acknowledge that Hurricane Ida went just west of New Orleans. So both times, the eye of the storm missing that city, the levees were not tested, and we shouldn't think that they were. In fact, we have some grave concerns, not just about hurricanes, but the amount of increased precipitation, including floods down the Midwest, that put water into the river that keep the bottom of the levees saturated. We've not only not seen the levees tested, so we don't know if they're going to hold up, but we certainly haven't seen them tested with the worst parts of climate change, which are more than just storms. It's these rain events we really got to watch out for. And the government says that the levees aren't ready. There are proclamations that the levees are maybe up to a level 3 category, and only that at best. So I think the narrative is wrong. Great infrastructure is not what's going to save us from a global climate crisis. And what we're seeing now is just the beginning. And if at just the beginning, we're at 8 feet of water in people's houses and not really tested around cities like New Orleans, I think we've got to stay alert and stay vigilant.
Now, you always make the point when we talk that a healthy ecology is not just about the environment, the green and blue environment. It's also about law and policy and community and people. Talk a bit about what you mean when you say, a healthy ecology requires justice.
It's right. It's a weird angle to come in at, but it's really 16 years ago, watching the recovery in the aftermath of Katrina and having my law background, where I was able to develop this analysis. And the work that we've been doing with the Southern Movement Assembly that I know you know well, has really been about, how do we bring democracy back into a reality that is shifting? The truth of the matter is, right now in South Louisiana and some parts of Mississippi and even some parts of Texas, the government, corporations, the people are not around. Neighbors are having to help each other. The question is, how do we come to decisions? How do we make decisions that impact everyone? If we can go through a collective process that's not top down, meaning one person having the answer and we all just have to listen to the most charismatic one, but instead a collective process of making decisions that work for everyone, we're actually practicing democracy. And this is going to be essential in the climate crisis. What we need right now are laws that protect the people, not the corporations that are actually accelerating this climate crisis. That infrastructure bill, that reconciliation package, billions of dollars in for fossil fuels. We need our federal government to make laws and policies that invest in our people and our front lines. We have no more time to waste.
Now, President Biden came out strongly talking about the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report, saying, indeed, yes, we're at code red for the human race with respect to climate change. He gathered, electric car manufacturers, unions, and also talked about the danger of sort of green gentrification, or at least it came up in the conversation. Talk about what you heard there that was encouraging and what gave you pause.
I mean, it's always encouraging when our leaders have, the commitment, the courage, the ability to speak the truth. Climate change is here, it's here now, and it's code red. I don't think enough Americans understand that the rest of the planet is waiting for us to catch on to that fact. It's our privilege that has really kept us away from the impacts of climate change, but the rest of the globe has been feeling this for a very long time. And certainly those of us in the Gulf South have been feeling this for a long time. So I'm encouraged that we finally have a president who can say climate change is real and has real consequences. I'm less encouraged. I'm worried that we're, giving all of these words, but doing actions that are to the contrary. We don't yet have an administration that's putting the people before these fossil fuel companies make their profit. We don't yet have decision makers. I mean, we're watching some of these senators and representatives halt and take out climate portions so that the bill can, the bills that are in front of Congress right now can pass with a bipartisan support. We need the support of every American leader who understands that the climate crisis is here now. We need more than words. This isn't just about what they can pass, agreeing with each other. This is about everyone having the courage to tell the truth, starting with our president and our congressional leaders. And, I'm really worried because what I'm seeing is an investment into ensuring that the fossil fuel company doesn't lose its profits, or that we make sure that we stay friends with the very root causes of the problem. But we've got to change. This is not about transition. This is about transformation. And we're going to need a movement to pull that off.
Talk about the green development part of it, because I think he didn't use the word gentrification, but I've certainly heard it out there. What are your fears on that front? And what do well-intentioned people maybe watching or listening to this program need to think about before they embrace the next, green development project?
I'm sad to say that most Americans really just have interest to just contemplate what's really at the root cause of all of these issues. The same root cause of green climate gentrification is the same root cause of the climate crisis, which is an economic system that is extracting everything from this land and everything from the people. My biggest fear right now when I go home is to watch all of the disaster capitalism that I'm sure got home before I did. I'm sure it had generators and access to power and food before we do, because they want to make a dollar on this moment, on our grief, on our tragedy, on our loss. We need, instead of thinking about how capitalism can work in this next round of profit making on people, we need instead a transformation of our economic system that works for the people. It's time right now to consider, what does it look like to provide food and housing and transportation and education for everyone, and let the profit margins be made off of luxury items and luxury things. But the basic elements of human existence and human dignity should not be up for profit, certainly not in the midst of a tragedy. And this green building and the green washing, when it's rooted in capitalism, it cannot work. When it's rooted in collective community power, it can save us.
All right, so I'm going to go to community power in just a second. But before we go there, to elaborate on what we mean, if you have not been in New Orleans since Katrina, you maybe don't have a sense of just how much that city has been affected by what many now are calling this green gentrification, and just gentrification generally. Mm-hmm. I heard this week from our colleague Malik Rahim at Common Ground Collective about 10 film companies having moved into his area. He's in Algiers. And none of them ponying up support, at least at the time he was talking, for relief in this period. Talk a bit about what you have seen, and you're with the Center for Law and Policy, are there laws and policies that we could lobby for that would require some kind of more fruitful community benefit or community social compact with companies that come into communities like this?
Right now, in the immediate aftermath, we can see pathways to many simple changes in laws. We're already getting information from folks around people being evicted because just like Katrina, remember, this is hitting at the end of the month, right? And folks are, their rent is due, and landlords take this opportunity to move people out. So do hotels, by the way. They make sure that the folks who can pay the full rate, the full rent, the full price of the hotel room are the folks who get the housing in the rooms, but not the people who are actually in desperate need of those rooms. We literally had to travel 5 hours north just to find a hotel. And we were hearing that folks were getting kicked out for folks who were coming in to work and clean up. I think we need laws that actually protect wages. I've heard calls for cash assistance. In these moments, you've got to understand our ATMs are down, our banks are down, grocery stores are down, things are down. And now the actual transactions have to happen with cash. I think this is a moment for us to really think about what gentrification looks like. If we green things to the point where we use the market to declare the value of a house as opposed to understanding the value of community integrity, then we get people from the Northeast and the West Coast whose incomes totally shadow the incomes of the South, able to come in and buy 2 and 3 and 4 houses and really turn that into a business. Meanwhile, families from South Louisiana are displaced permanently. My mom is an example of that. So many others, 16 years later, really not able to come back to a life that they could afford because of gentrification really pushing things up, and green gentrification really sort of putting this market-based value that ends up pricing folks out. It's something we've got to fix. I think this is a moment for folks who feel really great about consuming our way out of this to think about, what does it look like to make solar and other types of green infrastructure available to everyone? What would happen to a whole neighborhood? Not just the market price, but access to financing for these things so that folks don't have to leave their homes in order to make dollars and try to come back. I think these are all the types of laws and regulation that we need to see. In the aftermath of disaster in general, I would imagine this would be the same with fires and floods in the West, on the West Coast and in the Northeast.
Yeah, it does feel as if next to market price, we need community value, social value. What value is it for us, for people to be able to thrive? On that
Right.
note, there have been on the other side of the equation extraordinary mutual aid networks that have built up over the months of COVID. Many of them were there after Katrina, maybe endured and revived themselves to address the pandemic. How are people actually meeting needs that are not being met by corporations or governments right now? And how can viewers and listeners, if they want to find out more, do that?
It's the community, it's the community, it's the community. I mean, I think, pre-Katrina, Louisiana had some of the highest numbers of residents that never left the state. And while that sounds odd to many people who just pick on the map where they want to live and pick a neighborhood that they want to live in, for South Louisiana, for a lot of folks, the place where you live is the place where your mother lived, your grandmother lived, and so on and so on. The deep networks that exist in community are quite valuable. Things like childcare, even home care for elderly. This is not something you had to look outward for. You could look into your community for. But this type of care economy isn't valued. The networks that exist in communities aren't valued. And when they're disrupted by disaster, the only value that the US, our actual disaster law, as well as the markets and the housing markets, the only thing they value is the dollar amount. And you can't put a dollar amount on culture. You can't put a dollar amount on trust. And this is what communities have intact. We've got to invest in the front lines. We've got to invest in the communities. We've got to invest in the people who know, trust, and love the people around them. I've got a neighbor. People are often confused how we're friends. They have very different political views. My neighbor has been watching my house every day. I get daily updates on what's going on. I ask them if they require us to bring our nation together with something not rooted in fear, but rooted in love and abundance. We can do it if we try. We've got to value everyone equally. We've got to get rid of this economic system that is about extraction and not sustainability. And maybe, just maybe, if we act quickly as a nation, this won't be a code red for us. But I hear we're getting very close to that line.
So normally I end these interviews by asking for another kind of upbeat reflection. And that is, we've heard for years from people like Arundhati Roy about another world being possible. And I'm trying to kind of up the ante to another world is occasionally, sometimes in our lives, actually palpable. So I have that question for you. But I also feel like you're being incredibly pleasant and nice and polite. And you must be friggin' furious that you are still having to bang the same alarm that you were banging 16 years ago. The Northeast gets hit ourselves, and we feel like, oh my gosh, what were we thinking? But I don't know if we will listen any harder. So before we go to what gives you a sense that this is possible, let rip. I mean, aren't you pretty mad?
I'm mad. I'm mad. I've got to watch it, right? I'm a big Black woman from the South. Getting mad is not something I always have the ability to do, and people still hear my words. And I'm also, I'm sad. The truth is that I'm really sad that it takes this kind of destruction for folks to see what we're talking about, for folks to see this is a political hot potato, but instead a reality that's going to hit all of us. But I think I'm most mad about the lack of courage in leadership. I mean, we are now to a place in our country where death and death tolls are acceptable. I watched that little clock on CNN with the number of deaths, and it reminds me of the BP oil drilling disaster when they kept showing how much oil was going up. And it's like, at some point, people just become desensitized to these numbers. And we're losing our moral center. We're losing our moral center, and we're tagging it onto things like religion. And that's not our moral center. Our moral center is our sense of each other and our sense of humanity, and we are losing it. And these disasters are going to come more and more frequent. I'm never happy when people have to go through it, but I am aware as an organizer, as a lawyer, as a climate advocate, that this is now the time to pull the Northeast, the South, and the West Coast together to force our leaders to do better. We can do it with anger. We can do it with laughter. We can do it silently. I don't care. We're out of time, and we got to do it.
Beautiful. Any thoughts on the work of Kate Orff and Scape and the sort of soft landscaping projects that she's talking about and doing?
I love the work of landscape architects like Kate Orff and others who are really approaching this by asking a question like, what can we use in our natural ecosystem to really mitigate the harm that we know is coming? How do we think outside the box, outside of consumption, and back into a more imaginative and innovative place? I think the real problem that I'm seeing right now in the climate conversation is folks saying, yes, buy an electric vehicle or get these new things for your house. But the truth of the matter is the root of the climate crisis around the world is American consumption. We need to consume less. We need fewer big box stores. I know not everybody has access to what it looks like over here, but I'm in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And let me just tell you how many very large box stores full of things they have, only to spill out more and more people. It is this kind of consumption that is at the root cause of the global climate crisis. The rest of the globe knows it. When we think about what we buy, we have to think about how it ties to energy, how we are actually using a certain level of energy that is fueled by greenhouse gas emitting industries. And this is what we have to stop. In addition to using that innovative and imaginative approach that Kate Orff is using, it's important for us to understand we're going to have to make some changes too. We owe it to the planet to change now.
So you think we'll take a turn before that young person that you came to Texas with is your age?
I tell you what, he was in the car and he heard me on a lot of phone calls. And I think he started waking up a little bit. A 19-year-old African-American male who was just sort of connecting the dots. He watched how hard it was for us to find a hotel to stay in to get out of harm's way. He watched other people struggle, not having enough money to feed babies and to actually get in a hotel room at the end of the month. He watched a lot of people cry on the video camera with me just because they've lost it all again. I'm hoping that this has made an impact on him. And I'm hoping that this next generation will continue to step up and provide leadership, because we're going to need this. We're going to need change that comes from another generation. We're going to need change for generations. And my hope is that it worked and that it's enough.
And that we start. Well, you're starting. Colette, you've beyond started. Thank you so much. Really, it's been great to talk with you. I hope that we can make it down there at some point, not too long from now. Who knows?
We'd love to have you. If we just got off the phone with the chief of the Homa Nation. We've got a staging site down in Homa. That is a city that took a direct hit. 7,000 tribal role members in Terrebonne Parish, 3,000 tribal role members in Lafourche Parish. They are staging, and we're sending our donations in directly with the Homa Nation to make sure that our Indigenous brothers and sisters and anybody else who needs help who walks up to that site has what they need to survive.
Well, we'll put contact information at our website for sure.
Thank you so much.